I think getting stories out about the different parts of our city, culture,
Yeah,
tradition, people, stories is so important. Stories are medicine
of
for
course.
any nation, right? So we have to tell more stories, not less. My name is Louis Cardinal. I come from the Sucker Creek Cree First Nation in northern Alberta, but Edmonton's been my home for a very long time. And I'm afraid to say how long, but it's over 50 years. So this is truly, my foundational home. But my traditional ancestral home is in the Sucker Creek area of northern Alberta in Treaty 8. And I've been the project manager for Kihcihkaw Askî from its inception until its build out. Myself and Elder Will Campbell brought the first ideas and wrote the first discussion paper on creating an urban Indigenous ceremony grounds site in a major city.
And so this whole process I saw in your presentation took 16 years to complete.
Yes, yeah, 16 years, but it's more, I couch it in the reality that it went at the speed of relationship. So, yeah.
And what does that mean to you? Like building those relationships and building this space for the fostering of relationships.
Well, as our elders have and continue to say and continue to remind us, is that it's all about relationships. And we need to be able to recognize that we do share this common space that is called the city of Edmonton, not only with ourselves as Indigenous people, and not only recognizing that this is traditional Plains Cree territory, but also that this is an ancient gathering place that used to have Indigenous people from many different parts of North and West North America who used to come here to trade, celebrate, and do ceremony. So that means that the space has a lot of deep meaning to us as Indigenous people, historically, culturally, and spiritually. There's a deep relationship to this land. And also, our treaties are all about relationship building. They're known as the making of relations ceremony. So, treaty making is actually a ceremony. It's an adoption ceremony where one nation becomes our relatives, and so we have to live as relatives and support each other. So, in building this space, it was about recognizing that deeper relationship with each other, be it mainstream Canadians or the government of the city of Edmonton, and also within amongst our own nations that share Edmonton as their home today.
And so what does the name Kihcihkaw Askî mean?
It means this place here is sacred. So it's specifically pointing at the location of Kihcihkaw Askî, which is in the White Mud Ravine Nature Preserve. And it has been somewhat of a gathering and staging place for many years. During the Fort Trade era, for example, a lot of stories that we've uncovered has revealed to us that it was a stopping place where they would prepare themselves before they went into the fort to do trading. So there were locations like that around Edmonton, but this was one particular location that was remembered even by the southern tribes of Alberta who used to come up here and trade as well. So they remember that location as a place where they would stop coming into Fort Edmonton and before they went home down south.
That's very impressive. I feel like there's so much history in that space, and your explanation of relationships, not just with people, but with the land, is very
Oh, yes.
meaningful. Was this history and how the space used to be used considered when choosing the location for Kihcihkaw Askî?
It's interesting. When we were looking for a space, and I just have to add some information here about because I had been using that space in 2000, just before 2000, when I was working at the University of Alberta and heading up a program, and we needed a place where we can do sweat lodge ceremonies. And so I happened to be on the Edmonton Urban Aboriginal Affairs Committee, which I was chairing, and I had asked one of the city managers if, if there was a place in the River Valley that we may be able to do sweat lodge ceremonies. And so we agreed that this location would be a great location. There was a lot of privacy, and so I said, okay. So we started using that, and then in 2006, I think it was, yeah, 2006. Then there was an international Indigenous gathering called Healing Our Spirit Worldwide. And the Elders Council that was overseeing that event had asked me if there was a location where they can have ceremony and sweat lodge ceremony during the conference. And I said, well, here's a place that we're using. And I checked with the city, and they said that would be fine. And so they used it. And then after their week-long conference, then they asked, why can't we keep this place for ourselves to do ceremony? And I said, yeah, that's a wonderful idea, and I support that. And they said, great, because we want you to find out. So they put me to work. And so that's when we wrote that first proposal to the city of Edmonton as to why we needed it and why it was so important for Indigenous people.
Were there a lot of challenges that came up along the way of trying to make this happen?
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, we have to understand that there is, differing worldviews. So you have an Indigenous worldview that orients itself into relationship with the land, which is so important for all human beings as far as we're concerned. And so that is an important relationship that has to be reestablished. But the city is a corporation, and so it follows corporate rules. So that's a whole other worldview. And on top of that, you have a worldview of Western European tradition and thought. Um, and so these two, they're not opposing, they're different. They do fit side by side, but in conversations and dialogues, there's a lot of assumptions that could be made on either side about what one person means or intends to do. That created a lot of stress in the relationship. And in so many cases where disagreements went, we had to slow things down. And so the elders in their wisdom said, okay, we are building something sacred here for future generations. So we, as the builders, have to, check our egos at the door and always remember the center point is for future generations. And so we have to practice what it is that we're talking about. So that means that when we did have issues and frustrations and direct conflict, that we had to go into ceremony and to bring us back into balance. Because ceremony is our Robert's Rules of Order. They're specifically designed to bring us into balance again. So we're not working from a place of negativity or over asserting ourselves. So it was really an opportunity for the Indigenous community, particularly our steering committees, to really understand how the city works and how the corporation of the city works, and also finding ways in which to settle conflicts or misunderstandings so that we can continue to move forward. That's why I said at the beginning that we went at the speed of relationship. So it took us a lot of time to work with that and to keep moving the vision forward. But, we started to learn from each other very well. And so this allowed us to move faster and faster as the years started to go by. And so, it was an exercise in practicing what it is we preached, but also practicing the principles and values that the corporation of the city of Edmonton needed to follow as well. So we did learn from each other a lot. We learned that the city of Edmonton has a committee for everything. And then they learn from us that we have a ceremony for everything. And these things can work together, but it's the key of communication that really makes the difference.
How do you think that having this space has impacted the community now, like especially the urban Indigenous community and maybe also the settler community?
Well, that's a good question. I can say very positively, but let me put it in these terms: is that Indigenous people in urban centers are the only peoples who have to leave the cities in order to do, their ceremonies, sweat lodges, all kinds of different ceremonies. And it's a difficult thing because, Indigenous people are the poorest of the poor. particularly in urban centers, which is right now 75% of Indigenous populations no longer live in their traditional communities, First Nations or villages or Métis settlements. They're in the urban centers for the reasons everybody else is in an urban center, right? There's opportunity here. And so we realized that, in order to build this place, of course, the center point was about having ceremony and culture transferred to Indigenous youth, children, and families, which is the center point of what we do. But also we recognize that it's also a place of education and sharing that, the Edmontonians need to understand Indigenous people a lot more, or at least better. And ceremony and cultural events and activities is a key way in which to understand Indigenous people. So for the Indigenous population in Edmonton, it's a site that's being used quite regularly, but we have over 60 Indigenous not-for-profits that serve the Indigenous community, and not to mention the ministries and the agencies within the various governments that support and work with Indigenous communities. And they needed a place to also deliver their programming, their cultural programming, instead of having to, leave the city. That can be costly after a while. But being able to access things right in the city, which is, maybe, what is it, 4 or 5 kilometers away from downtown Edmonton, and it's on a transit system, so it's accessible. The White Mud Nature Preserve is still fairly pristine, and that was one of the terms that the elders wanted us to follow, is that it needed to be clean. And so right now what we're doing is we have a lot of different Indigenous cultural groups that come down, not only North American, but also South America. We've had Australians come. But also, we've opened it up to other religious traditions and cultural traditions. The Islamic community leadership had come down, and we had shared the space with them and shared a little bit of ceremony, and also the Jewish community through a couple of synagogues and congregations who came down, and interfaith groups. And so that allows us that opportunity to share who we are, and but also for us to see ourselves in the other nations and traditions as well. It's really quite amazing. And what that does is it bridges people together, because when you start to see yourself in another person's story, that's the first thread of relationship and relationship building. And before you know it, you pull on that thread and you're building a bridge, right? So, so
Yes.
it's been very positive that way. And not only different cultural groups, but age groups as well. So we've had senior citizens organizations come out and do a tour and get to learn more about who we are, do a little ceremony like teepee raising and all the teachings that go into that. So it's that way of teaching and sharing, I think, that builds the bridges. That really is counter racist or racism. But also it's about learning more from each other. I think that's the real present that it offers us. One note, though, is that this is the first and only urban Indigenous ceremony grounds in Canada. And so, Edmonton, the city of Edmonton, has to be recognized, and the Indigenous community, for creating Edmonton as the benchmark of urban Indigenous relations across this nation. Not only here, but it's also influenced other nations like the United States and Australia, particularly Melbourne, Australia, were interested in what we were doing, because they also have a high urban Indigenous population, at about 78% are in urban centers in Australia.
Do you see like a future project that can also be taken on by you and the city to create more spaces for Indigenous communities and more opportunities for?
Yes. Well, the urban population here in Edmonton, I can say it about across Canada, is growing in size. And what we don't have is sufficient urban Indigenous social and cultural infrastructure. There is a great need. If you just study the social disparity ratios, like health, education, those sorts of issues, we still are at the bottom of the totem pole, to use a bad metaphor. But we're at the bottom. We have to deal with a lot of poverty, a lot of health issues because of that poverty. And returning back to cultural tradition and knowledge and healing practices is a key way in which we're going to address those issues. a young person learning about their Indigenous identity and how it grounds them is a health issue. It helps in their healthiness, both emotionally and physically as well. So, it works all the way around. So it's been and it is proving to be an important place where a lot of people are coming. But also not only these different groups and cultural groups, but also governments. Various departments have come down there to do strategic planning and that sort of thing. And that gives us the opportunity to share even more information about our traditions and our cultural worldviews.
Yeah, I remember one of the people that we've interviewed for a different episode. It was about old theaters, and she mentioned the fact that even though we're discussing all of this like historical buildings within Edmonton, a lot of this history is like the colonial history. And
Mhm.
when you walk through the city, there's not a lot of Indigenous structures that you can look at or Indigenous history that you can be like, oh, that's very amazing. And it's very upsetting that it's like kind of pushed to the background.
Yeah.
So it would be lovely to see more of that throughout the city.
Work is being done, and it's been and again, because of what we've done with the work in the city here, the first being the Edmonton Urban Aboriginal Accord Relationship Agreement and the development of Your City, Your Voice, which is the Indigenous community speaking out and coming to consensus in terms of what their priorities and issues were. And this is going back 20 years now when we started that. That then changed the relationship, the foundational relationship with the city of Edmonton. From in 2005, we created what was called the Edmonton Declaration on Strengthening Relationships between Urban Indigenous Aboriginal People and the city of Edmonton. And then from the next year, the following year, then we developed the Edmonton Urban Aboriginal Accord Relationship Agreement. These two documents then laid the foundation for policy change within the city of Edmonton and opened things up for us to start working together in a good way. And so over these last 20 years, we're seeing some wonderful things coming up. Well, first of all, with the Indigenous people's experience at Fort Edmonton, that was a huge contribution to that Echo Musée by providing deep cultural knowledge and history as a part of the Fort Edmonton Park because the history of Edmonton for Indigenous people didn't start in 1795. It started, much, much thousands of years earlier. And so then we see, of course, Kihcihkaw Askî, we see the Indigenous Art Park, we see the Commonwealth Walkway, a number of different projects that are starting to bring in the Indigenous story into the public mind frame and into the fabric of what Edmonton really is. And so it's taking its time, and like anything else, it will always take its time to find its place within the city of Edmonton. And there's much more that can be done, but it also depends on how the community wants to move in recognizing those aspects there. So there's been a lot of really good work since the last 20 years, different relationship agreements between nations in the city of Edmonton, Indigenous nations, treaty areas, the flying of treaty flags and the Métis flag in front of the city of Edmonton. These are all major steps forward. So it sets the example for the nation to say this is what we can do and this is how we did it. So it's a wonderful story, and it all leads to architecture too.
I feel like you speak about this topic with so much knowledge, and I really know only like surface level, so I I don't even know what to ask to get really in depth about this. But another question I had was, what kind of like ceremonies go on in Kihcihkaw
Yeah.
Askî, and how is the park itself like, or the sacred land built to accommodate for these ceremonies?
Yes. Well, we are built in a nature preserve. I mean, it's also generally known as the White Mud Creek Ravine, right? And it extends from the river south all the way uh, to Anthony Henday. And it has a very rich history, which isn't well known, but we're gonna change that. But it is 13 acres, first of all, or See, that's my generation, right? 13 acres. So I think it's like 5 or 6 hectares. And it's not huge in size. But that's all right because the elders said we're not going to have all of our ceremonies held at the site because we can't. Like the Sundance, for example, it's a huge arbor, and a lot of people attend it. And it's an overnight thing, so it's like 4 days and 4 nights with a day on either side. So it's like a whole week of this sacred ceremony, and so. The Sundance is about going without food and water for 4 days, but you're in deep prayer. So you need a lot of, how would you say, isolation is one word, but so where the ceremony can go on without being disturbed, and also not over populating the site as well, because we do have a commitment that we will conduct this, but without destroying the environment. And plus, that needs to be done in part in relationship to other First Nations because they have Sundances on their territories or traditional territories. So what we then do is act as a referral service as well. So Indigenous people who are looking to do ceremonies from their own traditions, then we will direct them to particular elders and or ceremony leaders and like sun dances and vision quests and those kind of ceremonies that are meant to be held out in a more secluded natural environment. But everything else we can do down at the site, from sweat lodges to different feasts and ceremonies that can be done in teepees and things, and everything that we have for it.
My name is Richard Isaac. As you might tell from my accent, I am not originally of Canada, but I was born and grew up in England and spent some years in Hamburg, West Germany, before I came here as a volunteer. And I've been an architect since I left school back in 1970 or something like that.
We've come here today to talk about the Kihcihkaw Askî sacred lands that are in Whitemore Park.
It was something that I think the city of Edmonton wanted to do, which was to provide a space for urban First Nations people. And the mayor at that time was Don Iverson, and I think that was something that he was particularly interested in and passionate about. So they came, the city was able to negotiate a place for locating this center. And they worked with a number of Aboriginal organizations before, in the end, I can't remember what it is exactly, look it up here, an organization called Knowledge and Wisdom Center, Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center, took over as the managers of the facility.
It's a pretty big project because it involves quite a few different people, like the City of Edmonton, the Indigenous Knowledge and Wisdom Center, as well as Reimagine.
Yeah. And Reimagine comes for these projects with the architects, structural engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and the landscape architects. So it's quite a team.
A very big team.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that, like, throughout the process, you make sure that, like, you communicate with the community and make sure that this space is there for what it's meant to do?
What one has to do is invite enough people that you get a good cross-section of those that you are either serving, or if it's the community, they don't annoy people that are living close to something. So you try to get a good cross-section of people. And what we call, well, these days it's not very new, but when we started, Vivian and I, workshopping these things is what we do, so that you have a number of people in the room and find out what their ideas are. And if it's a building that has rooms in it, for example, you take little cutouts to scale and get the people there to organize those cutouts and see how they would like to have the washrooms laid over here and the meeting room here, whatever it might be. So the best way to find out is to just simply ask people and get as many people as you can. I mean, for example, when we do school design, we like to also get the school children involved in it, because they're the people that have to occupy and spend 8 hours a day or whatever it is in the spaces. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very considerate, and it's like, behind the scenes, you try to consider as much as possible, but you don't really know what goes on unless you're the person who uses the space.
Right. So to me, architecture is largely a learning process for me personally, because we do things like industrial buildings or cultural buildings, First Nations buildings. So each time one goes in and tries to learn as much as possible about the building that you're going to be designing and the people that are funding it or occupying it or governing it or whatever.
It seems like every single project is a big research endeavor.
Yeah.
To make sure that you get all the points that you need.
Exactly.
And with this sacred lands, there are a lot of like features to it. The 2 circular areas, there are permanent fire enclosures, and all of that. Could you explain a bit more about the park itself and how that came to be?
How the form of it came to be? Well, far be it from me to be an expert on First Nations geometry and so on, but I know that the circle, we've discovered the circle is an important part of the culture. So that's what drove the landscape shapes for where the teepee layout could be, or where the sweat lodge arrangements would be, so in the 2 circles. And ultimately it's going to be extended to the south, and they want to have Aboriginal gardens, for example. And so we would probably have a similar kind of arrangement there if ever we get asked to do the next part.
As an architect, does your role end once something is built, or do they come back to you after?
Well, if there's an addition or an extension of a building, we hope that they come back to us. They're not required to do that. Our contract is usually just for the building it's done itself. Our responsibility goes on for at least another year after a building is complete for what is called the warranty. So you have to make sure that doors are not falling off the hinges and glass is not falling out of the window frames and so on. So we do have an ongoing relationship with the building, and then we like to go back and see how the building is doing. Vivian and I went the other day to the Beth Israel Synagogue in the West End, which we designed 25 years ago. And it was great to go back and see that it's still standing and it's been looked after very well. And so
That makes sense. Were there any moments when designing these sacred lands, or actually making them come to fruition, that like stand out to you? Any struggles or any nice stories or anything?
I guess I know it's a struggle, but what we had to do is that we were dealing with 2 fairly different entities. One was the Aboriginal, the First Nations group itself, which comes from a different background, and then we also had officials from the city of Edmonton that have another script or another attitude. So our job was to try and meld the 2 of them together, and we were very fortunate in having a very good project manager from the city of Edmonton who had already I don't know that she necessarily knew much about Aboriginal culture, but she wanted to learn everything that she could do from the process that we did. So that was satisfying. And I think from the user group, the Wisdom Indigenous group, they also learned a bit how to operate with a city-owned piece of land and how to get what they wanted as well as they could.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that there is this land that can be used by the Indigenous population in the city. Could you talk a bit about the sort of goal behind designing this space a little more?
So there are 2 buildings. One is a functional building, which is to contain strange things like golf carts, because they wanted to have golf carts to be able to transport the older people through the grounds. The teepee poles, because they put teepees up on the site too, and they wanted to be able to store them. And firewood, because one needs to have a really hot fire to heat up the rocks for the sweat lodges that are on site. So that was one part. And the other was a building which had washrooms in it and a place for ceremony and a place that one could, they wouldn't necessarily cook food, but the place to be able to set out the food that they bring to the site, and people could could eat there as well. Yeah. One of the big challenges with that site was originally we had wanted to put it much further to the south, but we ran into challenges with the fire department, like because it's too far away to be able to have any sprinkler or system and so on. So, and there's a lot of trees around, and they didn't want, and then with a lot of fire being involved with the sweat lodges, the embers and so on could easily get out there and set fire to the fire. So the city's fire department didn't like where we originally planted it, planned for it. And you would have noticed on site that there are 3 or 4 of these steel cylinders, and that was because it was to stop the sparks coming out of the fire and getting into the grass and setting fire to any kind of fire is bad, but set fire to the woods and so on that are there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the best to consider that.
Yeah, it's pretty important. Yeah. The other thing we didn't mention is that it had a fairly restricted budget. I mean, it sounds like a lot when you say $3.5 million, but for a project that takes up that amount of space, it's fairly modest. So to be able to get the maximum of that was a really good challenge that we had to embark upon, and I think we were quite successful in doing that. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's a great space.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would want people to know? Like, let's say they watch this podcast and they don't know anything about Edmonton, about the Kihcihkaw Askî lands. Is there anything that you want them to take away from this episode?
Well, yes, that it's while there is this vision of exclusivity, and I think I might have cleared this up already, but is that aside from us as Indigenous people, connecting Indigenous people with culture, with ceremony, because ceremony is a healing process, right? It brings us, the attempt is to bring us back into balance. And I like to say that that ceremony is our Robert's Rules of Order. That helps us to live in balance and harmony, because we have to take care of our bodies, we have to take care of our mind, we have to take care of our spiritual needs, we have to take care of our emotional relationships, and that's all built into the process of ceremony. And in our worldview, we need to maintain balance in all those 4 parts. That's why you see the circle with the four directions in it. That is the mnemonic device that is reminding us that we have to keep ourselves in balance. If we are out of balance in one of those things, like if we're not pursuing, knowledge and information, education, then we can be out of balance. And if we're just focusing on the wellness of our body, then we're not thinking about our emotional it all has to be brought into balance with each other in order to live a full and happy and productive life. So, but these philosophies and everything are also open for us to share with non-Indigenous people. And through different organizations, they'll come down, like synagogues come down, churches from different denominations. Well, so we're always there to help share and to teach, but also to learn as well. So, it's all about reaching out and saying, okay, have this group. We'd like to come down and have an event down there.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's not only for ceremonies. We have organizations and even ministries that come out and do strategic planning. We also have land-based education activities and events that are taken there by different schools and universities come out to test some of these things. Orientation days are done by Grant MacEwan University. They have activities down there for their social studies cohorts. And so there's many different ways of utilizing it, right? Yeah.
It's a very flexible space in that way.
It is. Yeah.
It's for the people, and the people can appreciate the land while they're there.
Yeah. Well, and one more note is that we do envision that a site like this would be emulated across Canada. And I've spoken to 12 different Canadian cities and a couple American cities about the importance of developing Indigenous cultural ceremonial space within the urban center. because more and more Indigenous people are in urban centers and they need that cultural infrastructure to be available to them, because we don't have a church, a mosque, or a temple that we can easily, or a cathedral that we can easily go to on weekends. So we've had to build this to be all of those for our peoples.
Right. When you put it that way, it's like it makes me wonder why there wasn't a space like that earlier.
Mhm.
It feels a little neglectful, but I'm glad that we're seeing that initiative to um, create those spaces, and I hope that more cities also create spaces like the Kihcihkaw Askî sacred
Exactly.
lands.
Yes.
And it seems that you are doing a lot of work to make that happen. Is that
Well, I'm trying to inspire, but also the elders and the knowledge keepers who were a part of this really have reiterated that as being an important thing. So, yes. And
well?
so when you start to see yourself in the city that you live in, your culture, your identity, you tend to have a greater sense of belonging.